Looking forward to the unknown, and the next chapter should be something that's exciting. That's where growth happens. That's where new relationships happen. That's where you find out things about yourself that you didn't know about. Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Pursuit. It is Friday, December 10th, 2021. Now, I know last week, if you were following on social media, I mentioned that this week I would be joined by a guest. The game plan was I launched a little NFT project, so you're used to seeing these illustrations. There's the one for this week, or there, wherever Tyler puts it, that I've been doing, having fun, scratching this creative itch, and I've been minting these NFTs. So if you're not familiar with the NFT space, minting just means putting them out to be able to be sold as digital art. I have no expectations of a lot of people buying these, of these ever appreciating to be anything of a substantial amount of dollars. If they do get to a point where they are more than a little bit of money, then I'll start donating the proceeds. But the rest of it will just go cover the cost of just continuing to do that, and maybe pay for the podcast. But I was going to have the owner of last week's NFT, the Passion illustration, join me in scheduling within 1 week. Didn't happen. So we're going to push that episode a little bit further out. We're still going to talk about passion, kind of define it, why it's important, and then talk about how we pursue it. And hopefully my guest will be able to the owner will be able to join me, and they can share their definition of passion and why it's important to them and how they're pursuing it. So I think it'll be a cool project. So follow along. I'm putting them out on social media. I'm minting them on Solsea, which is a Solana network. So you may have heard of Ethereum. Solana is a newer network, a little bit faster. The main reason I'm doing it there is it's cheaper. Since this is just kind of a fun project, I don't want to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars putting these NFTs out on the market with no real expectation of this being a big part of my career. So, but Solana, for those interested in crypto, is an up-and-coming technology. It is a coin that's done real well, not a recommendation. This is not investment advice, but it is a good network to be building on. So that's where you can find those. So today's is already out there. You can go buy today's chapters illustration, which I think is a good intro to today's episode. So the name of today's episode is called Chapters, and you're going to see me do something more than I usually do. I actually have kind of an outline on my phone. This podcast, this show that I'm doing here on All About Your Benjamins, I really am excited about and want to take seriously. So I'm preparing for this more than I ever have for a solo piece of content. Usually I just turn things on and go. That's what I've done in the past, but there are certain things I want to make sure I hit today and some examples I want to pull in. So if you see me looking down, that's what I'm doing. For those of you who want to get started with creating content, I think you have to be perfect and have everything lined out and memorize it and be perfect. You don't have to be. Everybody gets to be okay. Those listening on the podcast won't even know that I'm looking down. It's only the people on YouTube that are going to see that. So if you're waiting to be perfect and want to have everything memorized, if creating content is a part of your passion and part of your pursuit, do it. And if you look down, no big deal. You're not a newscaster. You're not an actor. You get a free pass to be able to make sure you don't forget anything if you have some important things you want to make sure you mention. All right, so I want to kick today off with a quick reading. So I've mentioned this quote a number of times. It's probably the most recited quote I've ever had, and it comes from this picture in a frame. Now I have this printout, and that's all it is. It's a website page I printed out. It's framed here at my work office. It's framed at home, my home office, and it's a letter from Kendrick Lamar to his fans. Now you all know I'm a big hip hop fan. Kendrick Lamar is my favorite artist right now, and he's right up there with Tupac and Biggie as the greatest in my mind. So I love Kendrick. He hasn't released an album in like 4 years, and earlier this year he sent this. August 20th of this year, he put this out on his website, and I'm gonna read it all real quick. There's a line in here that I'll highlight, and we'll revisit it in a little bit. But I want to read this and explain why I think it's so important, and then kind of lead into today's thought. So it says, "I spend most of my days with fleeting thoughts, writing, listening, and collecting old beach cruisers. The morning rides keep me on a hill of silence. I go months without a phone. Love, loss, and grief have disturbed my comfort zone, but the glimmers of God speak through my music and family. While the world around me evolves, I reflect on what matters the most, the life in which my words will land next. As I produce my final TDE album, I feel the joy to have been a part of such a cultural imprint after 17 years, the struggles, the success, and most importantly, the brotherhood. May the Most High continue to use Top Dog as a vessel for candid creators as I continue to pursue my life's callings. Pursue. I love it. There's a beauty in completion and always faith in the unknown. And that's the line I love. I'm going to go back and say it again. There's beauty in completion and always faith in the unknown. Thank you for keeping me in your thoughts. I've prayed for you all. See you soon. So that was Kendrick's letter saying that he was done with recording albums on the TDE label, which is his crew and where he started and came up. I don't know if this means he's done with music or if he's just done with TDE, but basically this is Kendrick saying that he is closing one chapter of his life and that he's excited for the next one, the faith in the unknown. Now, I don't know Kendrick, but it doesn't look like it's out there. We know what he's going to do next. I've seen him do some creative video directing and consulting on that side. He's got other things I know he's working on, but here he is, one of the top rappers, if not the top, in the game right now. And he's walking away potentially from music, or at least from his crew, to go do his own thing. It'd be very easy to stay there and keep this chapter going, but he's ending this chapter and starting another one. We don't know exactly what it's going to be. He may or may not, or maybe he has a direction of where it's going, which is where I think a lot of chapters start. I know where I'm heading, but I don't know exactly how it's going to play out. And I like this line in here. It says, "The life in which my words will land next." And that's kind of the unknown. And if we go back a couple episodes and we rethink the record, Kendrick is already visualizing where he is in this next chapter. He's picking that needle up and dropping it over and finding out where his words will land next. So I love that. I've said that beauty in the completion line a million times. It's in the illustration for this week in the NFT. And I just think it's a great way for us to think about our pursuit and the things that we're going to have to do and the things that are going to do, the people who are going to come into our lives as a part of it, and realize that it's okay to end chapters in our life. And that's what today's whole conversation is about. When you go on your pursuit, it's not going to be one long chapter. It's not a book without breaks. There's chapters that are going to be a part of your story. Some will be long, some will be short. And it's not as clean as a book because individuals will have chapters as well as where you might be, your career. So there's chapters within chapters, but nonetheless, individuals and things and people and jobs will have chapters in your life. So as I conclude with the introduction of Kendrick, I admire the peace and the freedom that it appears that he's found. Going months without a phone, aimlessly collecting beach cruisers, and just having this opportunity to just do whatever it is that he wants. And that's kind of where I want to go on my pursuit. Is what I'm after is freedom. And it's not freedom to do nothing. It's freedom to do whatever it is that I want. Whatever interests come in mind, whatever passions might evolve, or anything I might want to explore, I want to have the freedom to be able to do that. Now, I know what you're saying or thinking, maybe. It's easier for Kendrick to have this freedom because he's a multimillionaire. Yeah, the bank account and the investment account probably make it easier for him to go months without working and collecting beach cruisers and all the things that he's done. However, that doesn't mean that we can't do that in our own way at a different scale. So whether that be dropping things that we've taken on, extracurricular activities or hobbies or things of that sort to give ourselves more time to explore and find out where we're going next. So yes, might be easier for him. Financially, he's probably okay, and that's a big stressor, and we're going to address that here in a little bit. But I admire his ability to say, you know what? 17 years of my life on TDE has been great. I wouldn't be where I wouldn't be where I am without them. But it's time to move on to the next one. This chapter has ended, and it's time to start a new one. And if he can do that, walk away from the millions of dollars that would come by staying with TDE and the future albums and the concert tours and all the things that come with that, then I think we can do that in smaller segments in our own journey. So as we go on our pursuit, we're going to have chapters that end and new ones that begin, and it's probably going to be scary to end a chapter. When we're in our current chapter, we know what to expect. We know our surroundings. We know who's around us. We get comfortable. We get complacent. And to disrupt that is scary. We don't know what's going to happen. But why else do people stay in situations, whether it's careers or relationships, that don't make them happy? Because ending that chapter, we find a lot of reasons not to do it. But ending that chapter is scary because even though it may not be what we want it to be, the unknown of the next chapter not knowing how it's going to play out. Is it going to be better? Is it going to be worse? Is scary. And I can't force you to take that fear on and be okay with it. But hopefully, some of the things we're going to talk about here in a moment will help you when it comes to addressing this and being able to work through accepting that it's okay to end a chapter. Change is okay. Again, people come into your lives for a reason. So let's dial further in on people coming into your lives or careers, whatever it might be, things. These parts of your lives, these individuals and seasons of your life and those ending. So if you look back over life, I remember reading somewhere, and I don't know how this number came up or if there's really any truth to it, but that every 5 to 7 years you change your circle of friends. And I don't know about you, but personally, if I look back over my life, there's some truth to that. You've got your elementary school friends, then you go to middle school. Some of those follow, some of them drop off, you make new friends. You get to high school, some of those follow, some of them drop off, and so forth. And while I still have relationships with people of my past, my inner circle now is much different than it was even just a few years ago. And it's not that those people from the past aren't important to me. It's just that their purpose in my life, what they were bringing to me, the lessons that they were teaching me or the support they were providing me to get to that next phase, their purpose in my life was met. And that sounds kind of harsh, and it's not that I think you should write people off, but just realize that not everybody who comes into your life is meant to be there forever. Hopefully there are people who are, family, significant others, spouses. We hope they stay with us forever. But even in those situations, sometimes they don't. Sometimes there's individuals that we think are meant to be with us forever that are toxic, that need to be purged from our life. We need to end that chapter before we can move forward. And only in hindsight will we realize what was their purpose. What were they there to teach us? An example I can give, and all I know how to do is tell my story and just share to kind of paint the picture. But I think about one stop ago, the firm that I was at before I launched my own firm. I was only there for 2 years. I went there thinking that I was going to be there long term, that eventually I would buy the practice from the owner, continue to work it forward, one day selling the practice myself when I got older. That was the intent. I was only there for basically 2 years. And it didn't end on the best way. It wasn't bad, but the decision to move on and start my own firm, while we both agreed upon it, wasn't necessarily timing agreed upon. But nonetheless, move forward, best thing that could have ever happened. And when I look back, I didn't know it at the time. When I look back, the reason for that stop, the reason for being there, was to learn what type of financial advisor I wanted to be. How did I want to run my firm? Who did I want to work with? What did I not want to do? And then some of those things I took and actually have carried on in my life, looking at the way that my time at that firm ended versus when I helped Thomas Kopelman launch his firm with Trade DeVore when we decided to kind of stop growing RLS Wealth. The way that I handled that was fully influenced by my experience 6 years ago, 6 years prior. And that was the purpose of being there. I learned a little bit about being an advisor. I learned some strategy and income planning. So there was some knowledge that was gained. But the real purpose of that stop and that individual in my life, who I really haven't even seen one time since, which is perfectly okay. The whole reason for that was for me to learn and grow to be better going forward on my pursuit. It was the final push to make me go out on my own. There's lots of reasons when I look back that it makes sense that I was there. While I look back, I wasn't my happiest, but I didn't know that at the time. At the time, I just was fine. So that's what I talk about. Like, that would be something that could be devastating for somebody, that they go into a situation where they think it's going to be one thing and then realize shortly into it that this is not going to be a long chapter in my story. It is a short chapter in my story, and that is perfectly okay. And you know what? When I left that firm and started my company, I knew the direction that I headed. I knew the first sentence of that next chapter. I had no idea how that chapter was going to end. And it's still going. I also would have never guessed that this chapter of my life would look the way that it has. Starting my own firm 6.5 years ago, I would have never known that I'd be sitting in front of a camera regularly recording a podcast and putting it on YouTube. I wouldn't have known that I would have journeyed around trying to figure out who I was going to work with as far as clients. I wouldn't have known that I was going to build a tremendous network of other financial advisors across the country, launch a community for financial advisors, join a startup in the crypto space. Those things weren't known. That's part of the unknown. And for me, I don't know if it's just my personality, that actually kind of excites me. Sometimes I find myself looking forward to a chapter ending. Not that I want to end people in my life or end events or end my stage, but that unknown and kind of having a direction and figuring it out, to me, is exciting. And again, that might just be part of my characteristics, and change is something that I've always embraced and welcomed. And other people, not necessarily the case, but you have to realize that you don't have to have the same chapter of life forever. And that in order for you to grow, in order for you to follow down on your pursuit, sometimes chapters come to an end. And that's okay. So how can we make this ending of a chapter less scary? Well, I think one of the ways is ending the questions around financial concerns. We talked about some of these things last week. It carries over into this week. But a big reason that people stay in a chapter, start rambling, like I do sometimes, rambling in their chapters, they write this chapter, is because they're afraid of the financial implications of making a change. Now, this is usually going to be a career type of chapter, but it could be a relationship. If you find yourself with a significant other who's not right for you, not supportive of where you want to go, maybe it is a toxic relationship, but they happen to be a big part of the financial security that you have. It would be scary to say, I'm going to leave this situation for something that's kind of unknown, and also, how am I going to afford to do this? Planning can help out with that. You can identify, if I am on my own, what do I need? Or if I leave this job, what's the minimum I need to make? This new job is going to bring this. How do I make it work? Just addressing it and talking through it and building a game plan for it, so that when you do end that chapter and the new one begins, you're not worried about the finances. You've developed a plan and you know where it's at. That's one. I think that another one is just acceptance. Understanding that not everybody who comes in your life has to be there forever. And these could be people that you love. These could be people that you're very close with, and you don't want to see them go. But you also need to be okay letting it go and ending that. And it doesn't have to be on bad terms. It could just be something where the relationship just kind of drifts off. You've gotten to a point where they've helped you to where you need to be, and you may have helped them to where they need to be. It's not always a one-sided type of story here. So when you realize that you're getting to a point where you want to make a change, and one of the things holding you back from going on your pursuit and continuing to follow your passions is that you are afraid of losing relationships, you're afraid of hurting somebody's feelings, you're afraid of having tough conversations, that maybe that's exactly what you need to do. And chances are that person might feel the same way. I think that if you believe in this, where we attract people on similar wavelengths and vibrations, and that they're there in your life for a reason, there's a chance that if they're in your life for a reason, you're in their life for a reason as well. And because of the way this harmony works, both of you are ending your chapter for each other at the same time. They may not realize it at that time, but again, in hindsight, they'll realize, oh, that made sense. And there will be no hard feelings over it. So I do think it's important that as you're doing that, especially with the relationships, that rather than let it taper off too much, I think having that tough conversation, if one is needed to have, is important. Because then you get to control the dialogue, you get to control the transition, you get to control the beginning of the next chapter, rather than if you let it kind of go on, it could end in a way that would be less than desirable, and maybe that will harm friendships and relationships that could have continued on just in a different form. If somebody's your very close friend, and in the next chapter they're just more of an acquaintance, still having them as an acquaintance is a good thing. But if you don't handle things the right way, if you know it's time to end that chapter, that could end up having a negative consequence, and maybe they're not even an acquaintance anymore and they're an enemy now. You never know. So I think that if you realize that it's time to move on, it's time for the next chapter, in order to get there, this circle of friends or this individual does not help me get there anymore, having a conversation, and it would be tough, and I don't know the words to tell you how to do it, but figuring out what needs to be said is going to be important. It's going to end things better, and I think it's going to be a positive way to start off your next chapter. Lengths of chapters are going to vary. This is another thing that's acceptance. It's okay to go into a career or a path, go down a path, and thinking it's going to be long-term and realizing it's only meant to be short-term. And that in that short-term, in that short chapter of that phase of your life, of your pursuit, It's meant to help you build for the next chapter, which may be the next chapter that you didn't even know existed or where it was going to go is the next long chapter that you were looking for in the previous short chapter. So don't get so stuck on saying it's gotta go. I gotta stay in here longer. When you know it's time to end the chapter, end the chapter. Now I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth now because as I'm saying that, I'm thinking about an illustration that's over on the side of my desk, and I also think that you don't end a chapter just because things get hard. Not everything's going to be easy, and you're going to have paths that you're going down that are challenging and hard. At the first sign of conflict or difficulty, I don't think you stop and end the chapter there. You'll know when the chapter's over. And sometimes the chapter ends when it gets easy. Sometimes part of the reason of going through that part of your pursuit is to go through the struggle. It's to hit that wall, and instead of turning around and going back, climbing over it or busting through it or finding a way around it. Ryan Holiday has a book called The Obstacle is the Way. The obstacle itself may not be the end of the chapter. That may just be the middle, and it may be a very important part of the chapter. So I wouldn't use difficulty or conflict or something along those lines as the determination of, okay, it's time to end this chapter. Ending a chapter is going to be something that you know internally. It's just one of those things you're going to feel. Your gut's going to tell you that this is not the path I'm supposed to be on. And a lot of times people talk themselves out of that because trusting your gut is sometimes scary. Again, the unknown, the fear of the unknown. Let's talk about building out a support system. So having people to talk to. Just like anything, your support system may change over time, but you need to have people that you can talk through some of these decisions that you're going to make. Have them be a sounding board. Be able to get your thoughts out, because sometimes thinking things, even writing things out, you hear and you receive them one way. When you speak them, it comes another. And there's been countless times that I have been talking to somebody about something I've thought about, journaled about, but when I say it, there's new clarity. Or when I say it, then I know what the action needs to be. Just hearing my own voice say that is very helpful. So I would encourage you to have a support system with you at all times. Could be many people, could be one person, but ending a chapter, starting a new one, that fear, the uncertainty, having a support system is going to be helpful for you to get through that. Journaling, I mentioned, again, speaking is one thing, but writing things out is good. It's also good to go back over time and reread the things that you were writing at different times of your life. See where you were in one chapter and what can you learn from that for the chapter that you're in today. So journaling, I think, is a good thing to do as well. And then finally, knowing where you're going. Now, you don't have to know all of the direction, all of the details of where you're going, but having an idea of where you want to go, knowing what song on that record you want to be, who's that individual, where's that place you want to be, knowing that is going to be helpful too when you end that chapter, because you know that you can look back and say, okay, I am here today, I am going there in the future, and in order to get from here to there, things have to change. Career, people, whatever it might be, this chapter needs to end. Now, I don't know if the next chapter takes me all the way to the next point or if it's just another chapter along the way, but knowing where you're going to go is going to be helpful. And I think that part of knowing where you're going to go is knowing that following your passions, listening to your heart, doing things the right way are going to guide you there. And I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I think, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. I forgot the quote. It was kind of embarrassing. But I brought the book this week because as I was reading last night, there was a quote in here that I thought would fit in very well with this conversation, and especially along the lines of knowing where you're going and using your passions and finding your purpose to kind of guide you, looking for the signs that we've talked about in the past. So this book is very hard to read because of the way that it's written and the translation, but this goes in line with knowing where you're going and kind of following your passions. So this is in the chapter called The Key of Wisdom, and it says, follow your heart during your lifetime. Do more than is commanded of you. When you've gained riches, follow your heart. For riches are of no avail if your heart is weary. Do not neglect to follow your heart, for such is abhorrent to your soul. So to me, when I read that, heart, that's passions. What are the things that I'm most excited about? What are the things that make me happiest? What are the things that I value the most? What is inside my circle of 36 lines? Go back a couple episodes, and that's what I need to follow. And following that will help me when it comes time to ending a chapter and starting anew, because I know I'm going in the right direction. So if you don't know where you're going, if you don't know where you want to be, it's going to be harder to end that chapter, because when you know where you want to be, ending a chapter which is the only way to get to that, take that next step, is going to be easier to do because it's moving you closer to that next phase. I want to end coming back to the Kendrick Lamar quote. There's beauty in completion and always faith in the unknown. Looking forward to the unknown in the next chapter should be something that's exciting. That's where growth happens. That's where new relationships happen. That's where you find out things about yourself that you didn't know about. But we are hardwired to protect ourselves. Unknown is also uncertainty. It's fear, and we want to protect ourselves. So going back through this and realizing that you're going to have to write a new chapter every so often. People are going to come and go. They're going to serve a purpose in your life that you may not fully realize until later on. You just have to accept and understand that they were here for a reason, and that reason will make more sense here in the future as I get into this next chapter. So I want to encourage you to look forward to that next chapter. Understand that we're going to leave some things behind that we want to bring with us, and in the future we'll understand why they stayed back. But don't get caught up and be afraid of changing direction, going down and following your passions, ending this chapter, going to the next one. Because in that next chapter, more good things are happening. You're getting closer to where you really want to be, the person you want to be, the life that you want. And that's really exciting. You just have to overcome that unknown and a little bit of that fear. And honestly, I think that those who can are the ones that end up living the lives that they want. And it's a challenge. Life isn't easy. It's not meant to be. This journey is not meant to be easy. And we have to overcome obstacles that we talked about, but also we have to overcome fears and kind of overcome this unknown and just have a little bit of faith that we're going in the right direction. And also understand that, let's just say you get it wrong. Let's say that you end a chapter a little too early. Nothing to say you can't rip out the pages of the new chapter, cross them out, erase them, whatever you may say, and go back to the chapter before if that's necessary. You don't have to get it perfect. And the beauty of this is, just like writing a book, you can edit. You can go back and you can change. You can extend the chapter if you need to. You can add an epilogue if you need to. But I just want to encourage you to, as you go on your pursuit, don't be afraid of ending a chapter, whatever it may be, to start a new one. Be excited about the unknown. Have a game plan. Know where you're heading, but you don't have to know all the details before you start that next chapter. And enjoy the process. Be there and be present in that new chapter so that you can absorb all of it and learn as you're going. So that is it for this week. That is the episode I call Chapters. We're going to be writing a lot of chapters together on this pursuit. And if I look back over the podcast even, there's been chapters in the All About Your Benjamins journey. So chapters are being written all the time. They're ending all the time. Don't be afraid to end a chapter and start a new one. So that's it for this week. Appreciate you joining me for the episode. I'm honored to be a part of your pursuit, whatever small little part I might be there. My ramblings every Friday being a part of your journey is exciting for me. As always, I'm open to anything you want to talk about. If you want to come on the show and talk about something that's going with you, I'd love that as well. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are. This pursuit is designed to be valuable to me as I go on my journey and kind of sharing and documenting, but also hopefully valuable to you, the listener or the viewer, as you go through it and you're trying to figure some things out. Just hearing somebody else talk about what they're going through, what they've learned, may be beneficial to you. So thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast. Reviews, comments, likes, all those things help. I believe that this show will continue to rise and become more popular because it's supposed to. I would just love that if you feel like you can help out. That would be great. So appreciate your support. Look forward to seeing you next Friday. It might be the guest, it may not be. And maybe the guest won't come on. She just may not want to. But continue to follow along on the NFT project as well. If you want to collect those, they'll be up every week. I'm trying not to make them too expensive, but want to cover the cost of minting them and kind of running the podcast. And again, if they become more valuable, this is artwork that people want, then I'll begin to donate the proceeds from that as well. So appreciate you joining me on my pursuit. Glad to be a part of your pursuit. And to say pursuit one more time, see you next week. Let's keep on this pursuit.